Heavenly Stories.
The valley of Elah was heavy with tension. For 40 days, the armies of Israel stood paralyzed on one hill, while the Philistines jeered from the opposite ridge. Every morning and evening, their towering champion stepped forward, casting his shadow over the valley floor. His name was Goliath, 9 feet tall, armored in bronze, a spear in his hand like a weaver's beam. His voice was a roar that echoed like thunder across the land. "Send me a man to fight." He bellowed, his laughter cruel, his words sharp as arrows. "If he defeats me, we will serve you. But if I crush him, you will bow before us forever." The men of Israel trembled. Even their king, Saul, once mighty in battle, now hid beneath his tent flap, his courage drained. Soldiers whispered in fear, "Who can stand against such a man? He is undefeatable." The people of God, chosen and promised victory, stood frozen, because fear had stolen their faith. But far from the battlefield, in the quiet hills of Bethlehem, a young shepherd named David tended his flock. He was the youngest son of Jesse, overlooked, underestimated, yet full of fire. His harp sang songs of worship under the open skies, and his heart burned with unshakable faith in the living God. He had faced lions and bears before, protecting his sheep with nothing but a sling and his courage. But greater battles were ahead, battles not of the pasture, but of destiny. One morning, Jesse called for his youngest. "David," he said, "take this roasted grain and bread to your brothers at the battlefront. And bring back news." Obediently, David set out, unaware that history itself was about to turn on his steps. As David arrived, he heard it, the mocking roar of Goliath. The ground seemed to shake under that voice. Israel's soldiers shrank back, eyes wide with terror. David's heart pounded, but not with fear, with righteous anger. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine," he demanded, "that he defies the armies of the living God?" His words stirred whispers among the men. Some laughed, some scoffed. "Go back to your sheep, boy," his oldest brother Eliab sneered, his pride stung. "You don't belong here." But David's eyes did not waver. He was not there by accident. He was there by divine appointment. And so, a spark was lit in the valley that day, a spark of faith against the darkness of fear. Little did anyone know, that spark was about to ignite into a fire that would change the course of a nation forever. The camp of Israel buzzed with disbelief. A shepherd boy had spoken words of courage no seasoned soldier dared to utter. David's question, "Who is this Philistine that defies the armies of the living God?" echoed like a challenge that cut deeper than Goliath's taunts. Word of the boy's boldness spread quickly, like fire through dry grass. Soon, the king himself heard. Saul, desperate for any flicker of hope, sent for the lad. When David entered the king's tent, the contrast could not have been sharper, the shepherd boy in simple clothes, dust on his sandals, his eyes burning with faith, and the weary king, draped in royal armor, yet weighed down by fear. David spoke with conviction. "Let no man's heart fail because of him. I, your servant, will go and fight this Philistine." A heavy silence fell. Saul blinked, unsure whether to laugh or to weep. You cannot fight him. You are but a youth, and he has been a warrior since his youth." But David did not shrink back. His voice was steady, his memory alive with God's faithfulness. "Your servant kept his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I struck it and delivered the lamb. When it rose against me, I seized it by the beard and struck it down. I have killed both lions and bears. And this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." David's eyes locked with Saul's. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." The king studied him. There was something undeniable in David's tone, an authority that did not come from strength of body, but strength of spirit. Slowly, Saul nodded. "Go," he whispered, "and may the Lord be with you." Saul ordered his attendants to clothe David in the royal armor. They placed a bronze helmet on his head and strapped a heavy coat of mail around his chest. A sword was handed to him. But as David tried to walk, the weight of the armor nearly pulled him down. He stopped, shaking his head. "I cannot go with these," he said firmly. "I have not tested them." And with that, he laid aside the king's armor. In its place, he picked up something far humbler, yet far more powerful, his shepherd's staff, his sling, and 5 smooth stones he carefully chose from the brook. As David prepared to step into the valley, whispers rippled through the camp. Some mocked, some pitied, but a few began to wonder. Could it be? Could this boy be the answer God had chosen? The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the battlefield. On one side stood an army frozen in fear. On the other, a lone shepherd boy, carrying only faith and a sling. The stage was set for a confrontation the world would never forget. The valley of Elah held its breath. David, small in stature but colossal in courage, stepped forward across the field. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of destiny, drawing the eyes of every soldier, every enemy, every witness. Goliath towered above him, bronze armor glinting under the harsh sunlight, a spear that could fell a man with one swing. When the giant saw the boy approaching, he laughed, a sound like rolling boulders crashing down a mountainside. His voice boomed across the valley. "Am I a dog, that you come at me with sticks?" He spat to the side, his contempt dripping from every word. "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Most men would have trembled. Most would have turned and fled. But not David. He stood still, his gaze unwavering, heart steady in God's promise. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin," David shouted back, his voice carrying over the taunts, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." The soldiers of Israel held their breath. Even Goliath paused, surprised by the audacity of this youth who dared to speak without fear. David reached into the bag at his side, feeling the smooth round stones he had selected earlier. He placed one in his sling, swinging it with precision honed from years of protecting sheep. This was no ordinary sling, it was a tool of faith, of experience, of divine courage. Goliath took a step forward, intending to crush the boy beneath his massive feet. But David's eyes remained fixed, unwavering. "Today, the Lord will deliver you into my hands. The whole world will know that there is a God who fights for his people." And then, with the speed and force of a lightning bolt, David let the stone fly. Time seemed to slow. Soldiers on both sides held their breath. The stone cut through the air, striking Goliath right in the forehead, sinking deep into the flesh beneath his helmet. The giant staggered, disbelief flashing in his eyes. The mocking roar turned into a strangled gasp. With a heavy thud, Goliath collapsed onto the ground, the valley shaking beneath his fall. Silence fell, broken only by the whispering wind and the stunned cries of the Philistine army. David ran forward, rushing to the fallen giant. With a swift movement, he took Goliath's own sword and finished what the sling had begun. The battle that seemed impossible was over in moments, and the valley erupted with shouts of astonishment and awe. Even Saul, who had doubted the boy moments before, now could only watch in wonder. The shepherd had done what no soldier, no warrior, no king could do. He had defeated the giant, not with armor, not with a sword, but with faith and courage that came from God alone. The soldiers of Israel surged forward, their fear replaced by renewed strength. The Philistines, paralyzed with shock, turned and fled, their champion fallen. The impossible had become reality. But even in triumph, David knew this was only the beginning. Faith had won the day, but the world was full of giants, giants of fear, doubt, and struggle. And each one would require courage, trust, and the power of God. The valley of Elah still echoed with the shouts of victory. David, the young shepherd, stood panting over the fallen giant, his heart pounding, not with fear now, but with awe at what God had accomplished. Around him, Israel's army surged forward with renewed courage, their cries ringing like thunder across the hills. "David! David! God is with us," they shouted, lifting him high on their shoulders. Soldiers who had cowered moments before now looked at him with respect and admiration. The impossible had been done. The unthinkable had become reality. Even Saul could not hide his amazement. The king approached David, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Who are you, young man, that God would deliver such a victory through you?" he asked, awe in his voice. David, humble even in triumph, bowed his head. "It is not by my strength, but by the Lord Almighty. He is the one who has saved Israel today." And yet, as joy filled the camp, shadows of envy and doubt crept in. Saul's own son, Jonathan, celebrated David's courage, embracing him as a brother, but some of the elders and soldiers whispered behind his back. "How can this boy rise so quickly? What place has a shepherd among men of war?" Even within the king's household, murmurs of jealousy stirred. The hearts of men are not always loyal to courage and faith, they are often swayed by fear, pride, and ambition. Saul, though initially impressed, felt a twinge of unease. A boy who could inspire men, who could defeat giants, might one day eclipse the king himself. Meanwhile, the news of Goliath's defeat spread across the land like wildfire. Villages erupted in celebration, children ran through the streets, and families praised God for his deliverance. David's family in Bethlehem received the news with tears of joy, proud that their youngest son had become the hero of Israel. But David remained grounded. He knew victory was not a license for pride. Giants of the heart, envy, fear, and temptation, were far more dangerous than giants of flesh. He prayed silently, thanking God and seeking wisdom for the days ahead. As the sun began to set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, David realized something profound: faith is not only tested in the battle itself but in what comes after. Triumph can inspire, but it can also provoke jealousy, suspicion, and trials that are just as challenging as the giants we fight with slings and stones. The people of Israel celebrated, but David felt the stirrings of a new journey, a journey where faith would continue to be tested, and courage would be required not just against Philistine armies, but against the shadows within his own nation and heart. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of Saul's palace, thoughts of envy and fear began to fester, setting the stage for challenges David could not yet see. David's name spread like wildfire across Israel. From the smallest villages to the grand halls of the king's palace, everyone spoke of the young shepherd who had slain Goliath. Songs were sung in his honor, and the people's hearts swelled with pride and gratitude. In the royal court, Saul's initial awe slowly twisted into unease. The king, once confident in his own strength and leadership, now felt a flicker of fear. "This boy," Saul murmured, pacing the room, "he has gained the love of the people. If he keeps rising, he may one day take my throne." Saul's envy was subtle at first, a wary glance here, a quiet suspicion there. But envy grows quietly, like a vine, until it wraps itself around the heart. And Saul's heart was beginning to tighten with a dangerous tension. Meanwhile, David continued to serve faithfully. He played his harp for the king, soothed his troubled spirit, and fought bravely in battle whenever called upon. His victories inspired the army, and the people began to see him not just as a boy, but as a symbol of hope and courage. Yet David remained humble, always pointing to God, never to himself. But fame has a cost. Even as the people cheered, Saul's envy turned into active plotting. "He has struck down thousands, and soon he will strike down my authority," the king muttered to himself. The very heart that had once praised God's deliverance now wrestled with fear of a young shepherd. David, for his part, did not let jealousy or political intrigue sway him. He knew that faith must endure beyond the battlefield. Giants came in many forms: pride, envy, temptation, and even the approval of men. And God's hand would be needed to guide him through these new trials. Jonathan, Saul's son and David's closest friend, remained a steadfast ally. He encouraged David, celebrated his victories, and reminded him to keep his heart pure. Their bond became a shield against the bitterness and jealousy that surrounded them. As David walked through the palace halls, he could feel the tension behind the smiles. Soldiers who had cheered his name now watched him with guarded eyes. Even some of the court officials whispered, plotting and scheming. Yet David did not falter. His faith, tested on the battlefield, was now tested in the quiet moments of envy and suspicion. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, David knelt in prayer. He asked for courage, humility, and wisdom to navigate the storms ahead. He knew that defeating Goliath was not the end, it was only the beginning. Giants of the heart and mind awaited, and only faith, trust, and obedience to God could conquer them. The night settled over Israel, but a storm was brewing in the palace. Saul's envy was no longer quiet, it was alive, like a lion stalking its prey. David had triumphed in the valley, but a greater battle was coming, a battle not of stones, but of hearts and destiny. David stood on the battlefield, the dust of Elah still clinging to his sandals, his heart still racing from the confrontation with Goliath. Yet even in triumph, he knew that the giant he had faced was not the only one awaiting him. Life was filled with giants of another kind, envy, fear, political intrigue, and human hearts filled with suspicion. Saul's envy had grown into quiet hostility. He could not celebrate David's victories without bitterness churning in his soul. Yet David did not respond with anger or resentment. Instead, he leaned fully on the God who had delivered him from the hand of a giant, trusting that the Lord's plans were greater than the schemes of men. The people of Israel continued to celebrate, singing songs of God's power and David's courage. But the boy-turned-warrior understood something vital: fame is fleeting, and approval of men is unreliable. True strength comes not from victory alone, but from unwavering faith in God. Jonathan, Saul's son, remained David's unwavering friend. He reminded David of the promise of God and the importance of humility. Together, they prayed, they strategized, and they encouraged each other to stay faithful. Even in a palace filled with envy, David found allies who supported his heart and lifted his spirit. Time passed, and David's victories multiplied. But through it all, he never forgot the lesson of the valley. A sling and 5 stones had been enough to defeat a giant, because God fought with him. Likewise, life's challenges could be overcome not by might or wealth, but by faith, courage, and obedience to God. David's story spread beyond Israel. His courage inspired not only soldiers and kings, but ordinary people who faced their own giants: fear, doubt, illness, poverty, or loneliness. The message was clear: giants may tower over us, mocking our weakness, but faith transforms the impossible into the possible. Even Saul, despite his envy, had to acknowledge David's destiny. Though shadows of jealousy lingered, the young shepherd had shown the entire nation that victory belongs to the faithful, not merely the mighty. And David, ever humble, continued to trust in God's plan, knowing that each step of his journey, through battlefields and palace intrigues, was guided by the Almighty. As the sun set over Israel, painting the skies in brilliant gold and crimson, David lifted his eyes heavenward and whispered a simple prayer: "Lord, may your name be glorified. Let courage, faith, and your power continue to guide me." And in that moment, the shepherd boy who faced a giant became more than a hero, he became a symbol of hope, courage, and the enduring power of faith. The lesson of David and Goliath is timeless: no matter the size of the giant before you, whether it be fear, doubt, or struggle, faith in God can move mountains, conquer giants, and turn impossible battles into testimonies of victory. And so, the story ends not with the fall of a giant, but with the triumph of a faithful heart, proving that courage, trust, and obedience can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The end, or rather, the beginning of faith in action.